The warm amber glow of crystal glassware and the low murmur of a packed restaurant should have been comforting. But for 8-year-old Leo, seated at a family dinner, the silence was his world. And tonight, that silence screamed a secret. Across the room, two bodyguards leaned close, their words meant for no one else. Leo's eyes tracked every syllable on their lips. They were plotting to kill their boss before the dessert course arrived. The boy was Leo Morty, and his silence was about to start a war. The target was his own uncle, Vincent the Oak Castellano, the most powerful crime boss in the city, now laughing obliviously just 3 tables away. Leo's world, defined by what he saw, not what he heard, had just become the only defense against a coup set in motion. But how do you warn a man who commands an army when you are just a child who cannot speak, and the traitors are watching everyone who approaches him? Vincent Castellano didn't earn the nickname the Oak by being careless. His Sunday family dinners at Gino's were a fortress of tradition, a public show of impenetrable strength. Every week, the same corner booth, the same security protocol. His most trusted men, Silvio and Marco, always at his flanks. Tonight, they stood where they always did, 2 silent sentinels. But Leo saw what the others couldn't. He saw the secret conversation. Leo's world had always been one of observation. Profoundly deaf since birth, he navigated life by reading the landscape of faces. For him, the restaurant wasn't a chorus of chatter, but a silent film of expressions and movements. He saw his mother's anxious smile as she tried to follow the table's conversation. He saw his older cousin, Gia, rolling her eyes at a boring story. And for the past 20 minutes, he had seen Silvio and Marco standing guard, their lips moving in a hushed, urgent sync. At first, he thought nothing of it, guards talk. Then he caught the shapes of specific words. Tonight, car, back gate, and a name not his uncle, Morty. Salvatore Morty was Uncle Vincent's biggest rival, a man spoken of in whispers at family gatherings, a ghost story for the children. Leo's heart began to hammer against his ribs. He watched Marco's lips form the word poison, his eyes darting toward the kitchen door. Then Silvio's reply, clear as day, after the main course. He'll never taste it. The weight of the secret was a physical pressure in Leo's chest. He looked at his uncle, a giant of a man laughing heartily, clapping his son on the back, completely unaware that the death warrant had just been signed by his own protectors. Leo's mind raced. He couldn't shout. He couldn't pull out his tablet to type a message without drawing the attention of the very men he needed to expose. The traitors were watching everyone, their glances sharp and assessing. He remembered his mother's constant warnings. Don't stare, Leo, it's rude. But his stare was now his only weapon. He watched the waiter, a nervous young man, bring out the main courses, steaming plates of osso buco, Vincent's favorite. He saw Marco give the waiter an almost imperceptible nod. A cold dread settled in Leo's stomach. The clock was now ticking down with the meal. His eyes scanned the table for an ally. His mother, she'd panic, make a scene. His cousin Gia, she'd think it was a game. There was only one person with the power to act, and that was the man in the crosshairs. Leo needed to get a message to Vincent directly and silently. An idea, fragile and desperate, formed. He looked down at his own place setting, at the crisp white napkin in his lap. He had a pen in his pocket for drawing. With hands trembling under the table, Leo carefully smoothed the napkin on his knee. He bent low, pretending to drop his fork, and began to write. The letters were blocky, rushed, but they had to be clear. He wrote the only words that would matter. Silvio Marco, work for Mortti, poison in food, backgate car. The note was his only bullet. Now he had to fire it. The path between his chair and his uncle's booth was a minefield, watched by 2 armed betrayers. He saw Silvio's hand resting lightly on the bulge beneath his jacket. Leo's mouth went dry. He could wait, tried to signal a cleaner after dinner, but the note said, after the main course. His uncle was already lifting his fork. Then salvation came from an unexpected direction. His little sister, Mia, age 4, squirmed out of her chair and made a beeline for Uncle Vincent, her arms raised for a hug. It was a weekly ritual, a moment of pure affection that even the hardest men smiled at. Vincent grinned, putting down his fork and opened his arms. This was the distraction. This was his chance. As all eyes, including Silvio's and Marco's, softened for a second to watch the little girl, Leo moved. He slid from his chair, the crumpled napkin a burning secret in his fist. He didn't run, he walked, with the deliberate, slightly awkward gait of an 8-year-old heading to the bathroom. His path took him right past the head of his uncle's table. Time slowed. The smell of garlic and wine filled the air. He could see the individual threads in his uncle's suit jacket. He saw the rim of the plate, the fork poised beside it. As he passed, he made eye contact with Vincent, who was still chuckling, holding Mia. In that split second, Leo didn't smile. He let the fear show in his eyes. He reached out and pressed the damp, crumpled ball of linen into his uncle's large, open hand. The transfer took less than a heartbeat. Leo didn't stop walking. He continued toward the restroom hallway, his back prickling with the expectation of a shout, or worse, a gunshot. He didn't look back. He had passed the point of no return. The fate of the family now rested on whether a notorious mafia boss would believe the scribbled warning of a deaf child he barely noticed, and whether he would believe it in time before the fork reached his lips. In the booth, Vincent Castellano felt the crumpled napkin pressed into his palm. The gesture was so slight, so fleeting, that for a moment he thought he'd imagined it. He looked down at the small, nervous hand retreating, then at the boy's back as he disappeared toward the restrooms. It was his sister's kid, Leo, the quiet one. Vincent's first instinct was annoyance, then a flicker of curiosity. He kept his smile in place for Mia, still in his arms, and casually tucked the napkin into his suit jacket's inner pocket. The laughter at the table resumed. His son Paulie was telling a story, but Vincent's mind was elsewhere. A note from a child passed like a contraband secret. It could be a childish drawing, a silly joke, but the boy's eyes, there had been no mischief there, only raw, unmistakable fear. Vincent gave Mia a final squeeze and set her down, his hand brushing against the hidden linen. He needed to see it, but he couldn't hear, not with Silvio and Marco standing watch. Their presence, once a comfort, now felt like a vice. He excused himself with a grunt, citing a need for the men's room, a natural, unchoreographed move. "Mind the table," he said to Silvio, his voice normal. He walked away, feeling their eyes on his back. The moment the restroom door swung shut, locking him in the tiled silence, he pulled out the napkin. His large fingers struggled with the tight ball. He smoothed it against the marble countertop. The blocky, urgent capitals stared back at him. SILVIOMARCOWORKFORMORETTIPOISONINFOOD. Be a CKG a TECAR. The words didn't just land, they detonated. A cold, precise fury settled over Vincent, smothering the initial shock. This wasn't a threat from outside his walls. This was the walls themselves collapsing inward. Silvio, for 15 years. Marco, his own nephew by marriage. He looked at his reflection in the mirror, the face of a man who had just been told his heart was betraying him. And the messenger was an 8-year-old boy who read lips. Every detail clicked into a horrifying new configuration. The rushed kitchen service tonight, Marco's unusual insistence on checking the wine himself, Silvio's repeated glances toward the back hallway. They weren't signs of vigilance. They were the ticking clock of the plot. The poison, his fork. He had been seconds from swallowing his own death. But Vincent Castellano hadn't survived 4 decades in the underworld by reacting impulsively. Rage was a luxury that got you killed. This required ice. This required theater. He carefully refolded the napkin and placed it back in his pocket. He splashed water on his face, letting a few droplets stain his shirt collar. He took a deep, shuddering breath, forcing his shoulders to slump slightly. Then he pushed the door open, returning to the dining room not as a king, but as a man feeling unwell. He waved off a question from his wife, giving a weak smile. "Rich sauce," he muttered, touching his stomach. He didn't sit back down. Instead, he walked slowly to where Silvio stood. "Air," Vincent said, his voice strained. "Need a minute. The courtyard, come with me." This was the test. The note said back gate car. The courtyard led to the service alley, the back gate. If they were guilty, this would panic them. He watched Silvio's face, a micro-expression, a flicker of unease quickly masked by concern. "Of course, boss. You want me to get the car around?" "Just some air," Vincent repeated, leaning on Silvio slightly as if for support. He caught Marco's eye across the room and gestured him over. "You too. Let the family enjoy." Walking through the bustling restaurant, Vincent's mind raced. He had two traitors flanking him, potentially armed, believing their plan was still on track. He was playing the vulnerable target. His own security, the rest of his crew, were outside in the perimeter cars, unaware the inner circle was rotten. He was alone with the cancer. They pushed through the heavy kitchen doors, causing a few cooks to glance up. The heat and noise were a sudden assault. Vincent kept his head down, playing his part. Through the kitchen, past the walk-in freezers, was the metal door to the service courtyard. Silvio reached ahead to open it. The cold night air hit Vincent's face. The courtyard was a concrete box, dimly lit, filled with dumpsters and delivery crates. At the far end was the high iron back gate, chained shut from the inside. And just beyond it, visible through the bars, was the idling silhouette of a dark sedan, the back gate car. Vincent stopped, pretending to take deep breaths. He saw Silvio and Marco exchange a glance. This was the moment. If they were going to make their move, it would be here, away from witnesses. But killing him in the courtyard before the poison took effect would be messy, off-script. They'd want the clean, untraceable death inside. "Feel better, boss?" Marco asked, his hand drifting toward the small of his back. Vincent straightened up, the pretense of illness falling away like a discarded coat. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet and lethal. "Salvatore Morty must be offering you a hell of a pension plan." The change was so absolute, so sudden, that for a second both men just froze. The mask of loyalty shattered, revealing the confusion and fear beneath. Silvio recovered first, his face hardening. "I don't know what you're talking about, Vincent. You're not well." "The boy," Vincent said, never taking his eyes off them. "My nephew, he's deaf. He reads lips. He read yours." He let that horrifying truth sink in. Their secret conversation, whispered in a crowded room, had been witnessed by the one person they never considered a threat. Marco's composure broke. He went for his gun, but Vincent was already moving. He wasn't a young man, but he was fast when he needed to be. He slammed his shoulder into Marco, driving him into the dumpster with a metallic crash. At the same time, his left hand shot out, grabbing Silvio's wrist as it cleared his jacket, twisting it with a brutal, practiced motion. There was a snap, and Silvio cried out, the pistol clattering to the concrete. It was over in less than 10 seconds. Vincent stood, Marco groaning on the ground, Silvio clutching his broken wrist, white-faced with pain and terror. From his pocket, Vincent pulled out his phone and sent a single text to his captain waiting in the lead car out front. "Courtyard. Now, 2 rats." He then looked toward the iron gate. The idling car had seen the scuffle. Its headlights flared to life, and with a squeal of tires, it sped away into the night. The backup plan had aborted. Vincent knelt down, his face inches from Silvio's. "The poison, which course?" Silvio just glared, a last act of defiance. Vincent backhanded him hard. "The boy saved my life. You think I won't end yours right here for him? Which one?" "The risotto," Marco gasped from the ground. "Special order for your table. They already plated it." Before Vincent could respond, the kitchen door burst open. 3 of his outer crew flooded into the courtyard, guns drawn. They took in the scene, their boss standing over 2 of his most trusted men, one disarmed, one injured, and understood instantly. Loyalty shifted on a dime. "Get them out of here," Vincent ordered, his voice cold. "Take them to the warehouse. I want to know everything. Every name, every dollar, every plan Morty has for the next year." As his men hauled Silvio and Marco to their feet, Vincent turned back to the restaurant. The immediate threat was neutralized, but the war was now declared, and Morty knew his first strike had failed. He walked back through the kitchen, past the startled cooks, and into the warm glow of the dining room. The scene was perfectly normal. His family was eating, laughing. His plate of osso buco sat untouched, the risotto side dish beside it looking innocent and creamy. The weapon was right there on the table. He signaled to a waiter. "There's a problem with this risotto. Take it all away from every plate at my table. Bring new ones plain and bring the chef out here, now." The commotion caused a slight ripple, but Vincent's calm demeanor contained it. He then looked toward the restroom hallway. The boy, Leo. He found him sitting on a plush bench in the hallway, swinging his feet, looking small and terribly alone. Leo looked up, his wide eyes searching Vincent's face for an answer. Vincent knelt down, bringing himself to the boy's level. He took out his own pen and a fresh cocktail napkin from a service cart. He wrote in clear, large letters, "You were right. They are gone. You saved me." Leo read the words. The fear in his eyes didn't vanish, but it was joined by a dawning, profound relief. He looked up at his uncle and gave a single, small nod. Vincent wrote again, "Can you read lips from far away?" Leo nodded, more confidently this time. A plan, audacious and ruthless, began to form in Vincent's mind. Morty had tried to use secrecy against him. Vincent would now use silence as his weapon. He had a witness to a conversation no one else heard. He had a living secret that his enemy did not know was compromised. He wrote one more line on the napkin, a question that would change both their lives forever. "Did you see the face of the man in the car?" Leo stared at the question on the napkin. He looked up at his uncle's intense, waiting face and nodded slowly. Then he pointed to the pen. Vincent handed it over. On the clean space below the question, Leo began to draw. It wasn't a photorealistic portrait, he was 8, but it was shockingly specific. A man with a heavy jaw, a flat nose, and most distinctly, a thick, dark eyebrow that was split by a pale, jagged scar. Vincent's blood ran cold. He knew that face. Everyone in the city's underworld knew that face. Golem Gr Zegors, not Morty's man. A Polish independent, a pure mercenary known for clean wet work and absolute discretion. His presence changed everything. Morty hadn't just bought a couple of guards. He'd outsourced the assassination itself to a deniable asset. The plot was more sophisticated, more expensive, and far more dangerous than a simple internal coup. Vincent wrote back, "You are sure?" Leo nodded firmly, then made a scissor motion with 2 fingers near his own eyebrow, tracing the scar. The calculus of the war had just shifted. Vincent helped Leo up and led him back to the family table. The mood was confused but returning to normal. The replaced risotto had arrived. Vincent leaned down to his sister, Leo's mother. "Maria, something came up. I need to borrow Leo for an hour. I'll have Paulie drive him home safe." Maria looked alarmed. "Vincent, what's going on? He's just a boy." "He helped me with a business problem," Vincent said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "He's a hero. I need his eyes one more time tonight, that's all." With a protective arm around Leo's shoulders, Vincent guided him out the restaurant's front entrance, past the curious looks of his family. His captain, Rico, was holding open the door of the armored town car. "The warehouse," Vincent said as they slid inside. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the warm glow of Gino's behind. In the quiet, leather-scented interior, Vincent pulled out his phone. He sent a series of encrypted messages. Assets were to be moved, meetings canceled. A quiet, citywide alert was put out for any sighting of Golem or his known associates. But the most important message was to his consigliere, Old Man Alonzo. "The boy saw Golem. This is not just Morty. Prepare the quiet room." The warehouse by the docks wasn't for storage. It was Vincent's strategic heart. Soundproofed offices, encrypted comms, a small armory. In a stark, white room with a one-way mirror, Silvio and Marco sat, looking defeated under the harsh lights. Vincent didn't go in. Instead, he brought Leo to the observation side. He wrote on a legal pad, "Watch them talk, telling me what they say." For the next 20 minutes, through the glass, Vincent's interrogator, a calm man named Felix, questioned the traders. He didn't yell. He presented facts, cited bank routing numbers to offshore accounts, mentioned dates and times of meetings they thought were secret. Leo stood on a small stool, his eyes locked on the men's lips, his own lips moving silently as he translated. He would periodically tug Vincent's sleeve and point to the pad. The messages Leo conveyed were chilling in their banality. The price for Vincent's life, $2 million split between them, plus control of his downtown rackets. The poison, a rare cardiac glycoside untraceable in an autopsy, sourced from Eastern Europe. The escape plan, a private jet from a rural airstrip, waiting for Golem's confirmation call. But then, as Felix pressed about Golem's specific instructions, Marco, the younger and more terrified of the two, broke. "We never met him. Only Silvio handled that. He said the Pole had his own man inside, a cleaner, to handle the aftermath." Vincent read Leo's translation of this. His own man inside. A cleaner. That meant someone who wasn't a shooter, but someone who would sanitize the scene, ensure the poison story held, perhaps even frame someone else. It meant the infection in his organization went deeper than two bodyguards. There was a third rat, one with a very specific, trusted role. He wrote to Leo, "Ask HIM inside where here, the restaurant." Leo watched as Felix asked the question. Marco shook his head, weeping now. "I don't know. Silvio said the cleaner was already in place, that it was proof of how deep Morty's reach was." Vincent had heard enough. He led Leo out of the observation room and into his private office. He poured 2 glasses of ice water. For the first time, he looked at the boy not as a tool, but as a person who had been thrust into a nightmare. He wrote, "You are braver than any man in this building. But this is GTTING more dangerous. The man with the scar is a professional killer, and there is another traitor somewhere close." Leo read it, his small face serious. He picked up the pen. "I can find HIM, he wrote. "How?" Vincent replied. Leo thought for a moment, then wrote, "He will talk to them, or to the scar man, I can watch." The sheer, terrifying simplicity of it took Vincent's breath away. Leo was proposing himself as bait, as a surveillance device no bug could detect. It was madness. It was also, potentially, the only way to root out a hidden enemy who expected electronic eavesdropping, not the silent observation of a child. Before Vincent could refuse, his phone buzzed. It was Alonzo. The old man's voice was gravelly with tension. "Vincent, we traced the payment to Silvio. It didn't come from a Morty account. It was routed through a shell corporation we've seen before, one linked to the DA's office anti-corruption task force." The floor seemed to drop away. This wasn't just a rival family making a power grab. This was something far worse, far more insidious. If the district attorney's office was involved, either directly or through a manipulated asset, it meant they weren't just trying to kill Vincent Castellano. They were trying to decapitate his organization and likely install a more controllable puppet in the ensuing chaos. The cleaner wasn't just there to clean a crime scene. He was there to clean the financials, to steer the succession. Vincent ended the call, his mind reeling. He looked at Leo, who was watching him, sensing the new wave of dread. The boy's unique ability had uncovered a plot, then a professional assassin, and now the hint of a conspiracy that reached into the halls of supposed justice. His disability, his silence, had become the one lens that could see through all the layers of deception. He wrote his next words carefully, knowing he was crossing a line from which there was no return. "The people behind this are very powerful. They are in the government. If they find out what you can do, they will be afraid of you. They will want to hurt you and your mother. Do you understand?" Leo's eyes grew wide, but he didn't look away. He gave a single, solemn nod. "To protect you, I must make them afraid of me first," Vincent wrote. "I need to find the cleaner tonight. Will you help me one more time?" Leo didn't hesitate. He took the pen. "Yes." Vincent's plan was a desperate gamble. He would use the one piece of bait the cleaner would have to approach, the captured traitors. He He would let word leak that Silvio and Marco were being held at a secondary, softer location, a safe house apartment, before being transported to a permanent facility at dawn. It was a plausible move, one meant to avoid a direct attack on the fortified warehouse. And it was the kind of move that would force the hidden cleaner to act, either to silence them permanently or to pass them new instructions. But Vincent wouldn't just guard the apartment. He would fill it with his most loyal men. And in the van parked across the street, hidden in the shadows of the back, he would have Leo, watching the building's exits, its fire escapes, its alleyways through high-powered binoculars, watching for anyone who shouldn't be there, watching their lips for any telltale words. As they drove across the city to set the trap, Vincent explained the plan to Leo with notes and simple diagrams. The boy listened, absorbing it all with a focus that was unnerving in someone so young. He wasn't just a passive witness anymore. He was an active participant in the counterintelligence operation of a crime lord. They arrived at the safe house, a nondescript building in a quiet neighborhood. Vincent's men moved Silvio and Marco inside, making a visible show of it. The stage was set. Vincent escorted Leo to the surveillance van, where Rico was manning the audio feed. He gave Leo the binoculars and a fresh notepad. He wrote a final instruction. Watch everyone, even MY men. The cleaner could be anyone. Leo took the binoculars, his small hands adjusting the focus. He scanned the street, the windows, the rooftops. He had become the silent sentinel, the one person in this war who could hear the truth without making a sound. Vincent closed the van doors, leaving Leo in the dim glow of the equipment lights. The trap was sprung. The hunter and the hunted were now the same person, and the fate of a criminal empire rested on the eyes of a deaf child watching from the dark. For 2 hours, the safe house was a still life of tension. Inside, Silvio and Marco sat under guard. Outside, Vincent's men watched from concealed positions, and in the van, Leo watched them all. He saw the regular patrols, the bored flick of a lighter, the silent communication between crew members. Then at 11:17, he saw the anomaly. A city utilities van marked water and sewer rolled slowly down the block. It was late for municipal work. It parked 2 buildings down, and a man in a work vest and hard hat got out. He didn't check a hydrant or a manhole. He lit a cigarette and leaned against the van, his eyes scanning the safe house building. Leo's grip tightened on the binoculars. He focused on the man's face. He was middle-aged, nondescript, the kind of face you forget immediately, but his lips were moving. He was talking to himself or into a hidden microphone. Leo strained to read the words. Visual on the secondary east window, 2 guards inside visible, no movement from the package. The man paused, listening to an earpiece. Then his lips moved again. Understood, proceeding with phase 2. The cleanup is a go. Leo scrambled for the notepad. His hands shook as he wrote, the letters sprawling. Utility man, talking to ear, said cleanup is a GO. He shoved the note at Rico, who read it and immediately keyed his radio, whispering the alert to Vincent and the teams. Inside the safe house, Vincent received the message. The cleaner wasn't coming to talk. He was coming to erase, and he was doing it with the confidence of someone who knew the guards' rotations, which meant he had inside information on the safe house protocol. The betrayal was even more intimate than Vincent feared. The utility man stubbed out his cigarette and opened the back of his van. He didn't pull out tools. He pulled out a long, narrow duffel bag. He slung it over his shoulder and walked, not toward the safe house's front door, but toward the adjacent building, an older apartment block with a fire escape that connected to the safe house's roof. He was going to come in from above. Vincent's teams were already moving. 2 men slipped into the adjacent building to intercept on the stairs. Another team repositioned to cover the roof, but they were reacting to the cleaner's plan. They were a step behind. Leo, watching through the binoculars, saw the utility man disappear into the building's side entrance. He then saw a shadow move on the roof of the safe house, but it wasn't the cleaner. It was another figure emerging from a rooftop access door Leo hadn't noticed. One of Vincent's own men, the one assigned to watch the roof. The guard looked around, then lifted his hand, not in a signal of alarm, but in a subtle, open-palmed wave toward the adjacent roof. He was guiding the cleaner in. Leo's breath caught. He fumbled for the pen. "Roof guard is helping HIM. He just waved." Rico relayed the message, his voice tight with fury. The trap had been set, but the trap itself was compromised. The roof guard was the inside man, the true cleaner within the organization. On the roof, the utility man appeared, climbing over the parapet. He and the guard exchanged a nod. The guard then pointed to a skylight on the safe house roof, a secondary access point. As the cleaner approached it, the guard turned his back, providing overwatch. But he wasn't watching for Vincent's men. He was watching for any interference. He never saw the two figures who came up behind him, silent as ghosts. Vincent's intercept team from the stairs had reached the roof. In one swift motion, they subdued the traitorous guard, a hand clamped over his mouth before he could cry out. At the same moment, the utility man knelt by the skylight. He unzipped his duffel and pulled out a compact, cylindrical object, a gas canister. He was going to flood the safe house with a knockout agent, then enter and execute Silvio and Marco, making it look like a professional hit that had bypassed security. He never got to prime the canister. As he looked down at his equipment, Vincent Castellano himself stepped out from behind a rooftop vent. He held a pistol with a long suppressor. "For a cleaner," Vincent said, his voice a low growl carried by the night wind, "you're about to make a very large mess." The utility man froze, his hand still on the canister. He didn't reach for a weapon. He was a planner, not a fighter. "You can't kill me," he said, his voice calm. "I'm a sworn officer of the court. Detective Miller, Organized Crime Task Force. Shooting me is murder of a police officer." Vincent did lower the gun. "And poisoning a civilian is what? A public service. Those men in there are criminals, traitors. The city is better off without them, and without you." The detective's arrogance was his shield. He believed his badge made him untouchable. "You're not here on city business," Vincent said, taking a step closer. "You're here on Salvatore Morti's business, and the DA's business. You're the cleaner because you can make evidence appear and disappear. You were going to kill 2 of my men and plant evidence pointing to me, giving the task force a reason to raid every one of my operations." A flicker of surprise in the detective's eyes confirmed it. The conspiracy was real, and it reached into the police department. Vincent's phone, on speaker in his pocket, was recording every word. "You're a smart man, Castellano, but you're still a dinosaur. The future is about control, not territory. Morty understands that. The DA understands that. They want a manageable entity. You are not manageable." "No," Vincent agreed, "I'm not." He didn't pull the trigger. Instead, he nodded to his men, who moved in and disarmed the detective. They took his badge, his wallet, his hidden wires. The evidence was now in Vincent's hands. The war ended not with a shootout, but with a series of quiet, brutal transactions. The recording of Detective Miller's confession was copied. One copy was delivered anonymously to the Internal Affairs Division, along with the financial records linking Miller and an assistant district attorney to Morty's shell corporations. Another copy was delivered to Morty himself, with a simple note: "Your protection is gone. Leave the city by sunrise." Faced with the exposure of his government ties and the certainty of Vincent's retaliation, Salvatore Morty chose exile over annihilation. He boarded a plane for Costa Rica that morning, leaving his operations in disarray. The assistant district attorney resigned abruptly for personal reasons. Detective Miller was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder, among other crimes. The official story was a rogue cop in bed with organized crime. The deeper truth was buried, a silent victory for Vincent Castellano. In the weeks that followed, a new routine began. Leo's mother, Maria, received a phone call from the administration of a prestigious private school specializing in support for deaf students. A full scholarship had been mysteriously endowed for her son, covering not only tuition but also transportation and tutoring. The family's modest apartment was paid off. When Maria asked her brother how this could happen, Vincent simply said, "The city owes him. Let it be." For Vincent, the calculus of power had changed. He had survived because of a weakness he never considered a strength. He began to quietly reform his operations, distancing himself from the old, violent methods. He invested in legitimate businesses, using the intelligence gathered from the failed coup to dismantle his rivals not with bullets, but with lawsuits and regulatory pressure. The oak was bending, adapting. And every Sunday, the family dinner at Gino's continued. But now, Leo sat not at the children's table, but at Vincent's right hand. They communicated through a shared notepad, a silent council in the midst of the noisy restaurant. Leo would tell him about school, about the friends he was finally making. Vincent would tell him, in simple terms, about business. He began to use the boy as a trusted advisor in meetings, having him observe from a distance, reading the lips of associates Vincent wasn't sure he could trust. Leo became his secret weapon, his human lie detector. One evening, months later, Vincent wrote on their now familiar pad, "The man with the scar, Golem, he was found in New Jersey. He will not be a problem anymore." Leo read it and nodded. He picked up the pen. Did he suffer? Vincent considered the question, then wrote back with honesty. "He feared you. His last words were the boy. It was the boy. He died confused. That is suffering enough." Leo looked at his uncle, then at the bustling restaurant, at his mother laughing with his aunt. He wrote one final message for the night, a sentence that held the weight of everything that had changed. "I am not afraid of silence anymore." Vincent read the words and felt a surge of pride and a pang of something like regret. He had pulled this child into his dark world, and in return, the child had given him a new way to see. He had saved Vincent's life, but Vincent had given him a purpose that went beyond the isolation of his disability. It was a terrible, beautiful exchange. The final surprise came not from the world of crime, but from the world of science. At a parent-teacher conference, a specialist pulled Maria aside. She had been reviewing Leo's files and the remarkable cognitive assessments he'd been given since entering the school. "Mrs. Morty," the specialist said, "your son's lip-reading ability isn't just good. It's statistically off the charts. We've recorded him accurately identifying words from over 50 feet away in suboptimal lighting. It's a level of visual linguistic processing we rarely see. With his permission, we'd like to study his techniques. He could help us develop new methods to teach the deaf and hard of hearing." Maria, tears in her eyes, told Vincent the news. He wasn't surprised. He had seen the superpower in action. But now that power would have a chance to grow in the light, to help people, not just to wage war in the shadows. It was the redemption he hadn't known he was seeking. On a crisp fall day, Vincent took Leo to the opening of a new community center in the old neighborhood, one funded by a charitable foundation he had established. It included a state-of-the-art deaf literacy program. As they cut the ribbon, Vincent looked down at the boy who had remade his world. Leo looked up and smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. He didn't need to say anything. In their shared silence, everything was understood. The war was over. A new, quieter empire was being built. And at its heart was the boy who heard the words no one else could hear, and in doing so, found his own voice. The story of Leo Morty and Vincent Castellano is more than a tale of a crime averted. It is a map of a world turned upside down, where the perceived weakest link became the unbreakable chain. In the deafening noise of power plays and whispered conspiracies, the ultimate truth was heard in total silence. For centuries, narratives have boxed the deaf and hard of hearing into two roles: the pitiful victim or the inspirational supercrip, overcoming their disability to perform miracles. Leo's story flips that script entirely. His ability wasn't an overcoming. It was a different way of being, a different way of knowing. And in a world saturated with lies, that different way of knowing was the most powerful weapon of all. Vincent, a man who built his kingdom on fear and force, was saved not by a bigger gun or a more loyal soldier, but by a child's profound attention. He was forced to confront a simple, revolutionary idea that what you dismiss as a deficit might be the very key to your survival. His entire empire had been predicated on hearing the right whispers, catching the right rumors. He never imagined the most important message would come from someone who heard nothing at all. This forces us to ask an uncomfortable question. In our own lives, in our businesses, in our societies, what are we failing to see because we're only listening for what we expect to hear? What truths are passing right before our eyes, spoken on the lips of those we've taught ourselves to ignore? The Leo Mortys of the world are everywhere, not just the deaf, but the quiet, the observant, the ones who process information differently. Their value isn't in conforming to our noisy standards, but in the unique clarity of their perspective. The real victory wasn't the dismantling of Morty's plot or the exposure of a corrupt detective. It was the transformation of a man like Vincent Castellano. His legacy was rewritten not in blood, but in scholarship funds and community centers. He learned that true power isn't just about what you can take, but what you can understand. And sometimes, to understand, you have to stop talking and start watching. Leo's future is no longer defined by a lack, but by a rare and extraordinary gift. A gift that will now be studied to help others, turning the skill that stopped a gang war into a tool for connection and education. From the darkness of a restaurant conspiracy came a light for an entire community. So the next time you walk into a crowded room, pause for a moment. Imagine what you might learn if you closed your ears and only opened your eyes. The most important conversations aren't always the loudest. Sometimes, they are the ones spoken in the quietest confidence, waiting for the right person with the right kind of silence to read them. If you were captivated by this story of perception, power, and a silence that spoke volumes, then you won't want to miss what we explore next. We dive deep into other real-world cases where an unexpected skill changed the course of history. Make sure you're subscribed and have notifications on, because the next story is already waiting. Thank you for watching.